Which side you want to sit on? You know that?
Yes, sir.
Oh, what a blessing, what a blessing. What a blessing.
All right. So I thought I was going to do this by the book and really follow the rules or take a stab at following the rules tonight. If you know me, you know that it's not my strength following rules. I don't know what those are. But I was asked here tonight by the MLK Council to spend some time talking with Brother West about his experiences, his life, and what we see as a future for our community. Because I think those are the things that matter. Tonight's theme is disruptive love. And when you think about the word disruptive and you think about the word love, Dr. West said it best, love is disruptive. At what point in your life has love ever been anything other than a turbulent experience between I want this, I don't want that, I love this, I don't love that, but I like it a lot and I'm going to stick with it, even though it's not good for me sometimes. And so what I think I hear when I hear disruptive love, Dr. West, is what it is to honestly know love. And I think that is a mind-blowing concept for a lot of people to know what it is to love and to love deeply and to love honestly. And as we celebrate the life and the journey of Dr. King, what he stood for and what he's done for African Americans and many people around the world, it's not just the African American journey that we highlight through MLK. But what I think is highlighted with Dr. King is the fact that he loved us all enough.
Yes, he did.
And that's disruptive. Because you see a man, and I see a man, who took his time to serve his community as a reverend, as a father, as a husband, and that takes a lot in itself. But then you add the pressures of being Black in America, the oppression that is associated with being Black in America, the indignity, the inequity, the inequality, the injustice. Tell me what you think of as we take this journey through disruptive love tonight. The first thing that comes to mind, because this is an emotional topic for me. And guys, we're making tears tonight.
No.
But I think it's an honest question. What is disruptive love?
Well, there's no harm in the tears, my dear sister. There's no harm in the tears. See, Socrates never cried. He never shed a tear. So he had great intellectual integrity, but Jesus wept. Oh, that's much deeper. That's much deeper. He wept because of Lazarus. He wept because of Jerusalem. So no harm in tears. We come from a people who has been transfiguring tears into laughter, into love for 400 years. Laughter song. So I want to first salute all of the leaders who are kind enough to bring a cracked vessel like me back to Arkansas. It's true. In Northwest Arkansas, something is happening in this region. Something is happening in this state. And the country and the world needs to take notice. And to the degree to which you're able to stay in contact with the grand legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. is the degree to which you will be able to have an impact and not just be included, but transform Northwest Arkansas into what it ought to be. And it embraces the humanity of each and every one of us, no matter what color, no matter what gender, no matter what religious identity or sexual orientation. Now, for me, it's important anytime we talk about love, you talk about a people who have been hated chronically for 400 years and yet keep dishing out love warriors every generation. So when you talk about love, first you talk about what goes into the making of it, but also what it is in the face of. So all of us, we are who we are because somebody loved us. I know that's true for me. I don't exist without Irene B. West and Clifton West, mom and dad. I don't exist without Shiloh Baptist Church and Reverend Willie P. Cook and Deacon Hinton and Sarah Ray, my vacation Bible school teacher, because they gave me a sense of self-respect and self-confidence and self-determination. So anytime we talk about love, and especially among a hated people, where the very act of love is emancipatory, not just disruptive, but it transforms you and straightens you back up. We heard this magnificent music of Paul Lawrence Dunbar, Take It Off the Mask. Love forces us to take off the mask. We know we cannot live within, but fear we cannot live without. That's a love warrior coming out of Harlem named James Baldwin, the genius of James Baldwin. So when we talk about love, we talk about Martin King, let's always situate and contextualize him. He's not an isolated figure to be viewed as an icon in a museum. He's a wave in an ocean of a great people who, at our best, a black people who, in the face of all of this chronic hatred, refused to hate back and decided to hate the sin, not the sinner, the domination, and keep track of the humanity of those who were dominating. Martin didn't do this on his own. He learned it from Alberta. He learned it from Martin Luther King Sr. He learned it from Ebenezer Baptist Church. He learned it from Benjamin Mays. He learned it from Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and Ida B. Wells Barnett and Mahalia Jackson, and even a great brother named Curtis Mayfield, who's from the same city as our dear sister Natasha. Namely what? He enacts the anthem of a great black people, which is lift every voice, not echo. See, we live in a silo, polarized, gangsterized society. For the most part, all we hear is just echoes from various sides. And you can't be a loving person unless you find out who you are and find your own voice. That's why black people are a blues people and a jazz centered people, because you can't sing the blues, even though you have it. You can't sing the blues unless you find your voice. And you find your voice by situating yourself in stories that are bigger than you. Ralph Ellison used to say the blues ain't nothing but a personal narrative of individual catastrophe lyrically expressed. Nobody loves me but my mama, and she might be driving too. That's the king of the blues. That's B.B. coming out of gut bucket, Jim Crow terrorized Mississippi. How does that love keep flowing in that context and make its way to historic St. James Missionary Baptist Church? We've got Brother Smith here, Sister Smith here, and the First Lady. Well, Sister Smith's the First Lady, but oh, Edith Hawkins, where is she? Where is she? Where is she? Just looking at her and seeing that style and that poise and that sophistication, part of what the OJs would call a love train, part of what the Isley Brothers would call a caravan of love, flowing in Jesus' name in St. James. Now, you see, that is a vital tradition to keep alive. It's not for us to be spectators and look at it and say, oh, how great Martin was. Wasn't he something? No, he was a cracked vessel just like you and me. He's trying to love his crooked neighbor with his crooked heart. That's what he learned in Ebenezer. And so anytime you talk about love, you're talking about two things that most people don't want to talk about. First thing you're talking about is courage. Courage. Courage is that enabling virtue that makes all the other virtues possible. And if you're a coward, you'll never know what love is, because you never know what vulnerability is. You never know what intimacy is. You never know what opening yourself is. You'll never be a soulful blues woman, because soul is the sharing of a soothing sweetness against the backdrop of a ugly catastrophe, and you still courageous enough to take your own wounds and scars and bruises and transfigure them into a sound that empowers others rather than put others down. That's Ma Rainey. That's Bessie Smith. That's Aretha. That's why the music that we've heard here, thank God for Landon Smith, thank God for Stephen Hayes, this music is not ornamental and decorative to entertain us. This music comes out of blood, sweat, and tears of 244 years of barbaric white supremacist slavery and another 100 years of Jim Crow senior. For every 2.5 days for 50 years, some black child, a woman, a man hanging from that tree, that strange fruit. The great Billie Holiday of Baltimore City sang about, and the Jewish brother Maripol writing the lyrics. That's what that music, that song, wrestling with what it means to be human, that's what love is. But even more challenging than this, and this is where the tears come in, that love is fundamentally about learning how to die. You got to learn how to die. That's why Brother Paul says Christians must die daily. You can't fall in love with somebody unless some of your narcissistic, hedonistic self dies, so something new emerges in you, entangled with another person, and you walking around with a smile on your face and joy in your soul, at least for a while. We ain't going to talk about how long it lives. You got Sappho with bittersweet going to kick in maybe, but you have to learn how to die in order to learn how to live. And what it was about black people is that when we were first brought here on those slave ships, the attempt was to confine us to being socially dead. And they tried to convince us that we ought to be spiritually dead. And we said, no. We might not have an Atlanta territory. We might not have any rights and liberties, but we still are human beings. It was against the law for black people to worship God without white supervision under U.S. slavery. What did we do? We stole away at night in ring shouts and held our hands and lifted our voices and sang songs, the spirituals that you heard in part today, songs that will be heard down through the annals of time. With the institution of barbaric slavery gone, the voices are still heard, not echoes. No, because we're going to get to that presently. These days, almost all you hear are echoes. Everybody wants to be an echo to get over rather than find a voice to keep the faith. Oh, that's a different thing. I'm glad grandmama didn't opt for that. I'm glad granddad didn't opt for that. Just to get over by any means. Keep wearing the mask and laugh when it ain't funny and scratch when it don't itch. Just do anything to make it. Just do anything for worldly success. This day is about greatness. Moral, spiritual greatness. And it's not a function of skin pigmentation. Because I know a whole lot of black thugs and gangsters. I got a whole lot of thug in me, but we won't get into that right now. No, but greatness is a spiritual formation and moral cultivation and courageous action. So when you're talking about love, you're talking about what kind of spiritual formation you have, what kind of moral cultivation, and most importantly, what kind of courage do you have to be changed and transformed? Does that make a little sense?
It makes a little sense.
Okay, no, that's good.
You gave me something there, okay, this is what I came up with.
Yes.
I heard the word courage, and I heard the word song.
Yes.
And for me, growing up as a early 80s baby, 83, my life was very much still Jim Crow South. Believe it or not, 83, DeShay County, Arkansas, was still Jim Crow South because we still hadn't figured out how to be quite equitable. And what I'm wondering is, where do we find that song right now? Or how do we find the courage to even sing that song, knowing that we have been told by society in so many ways that we should be fixed, we should be okay, we should take what is being given to us, and that should be proof enough that we have made it, and we are in fact equal. I'm wondering how many of us have forgotten what the fight was about. Mm-hmm. And how many of us, and this is, I'm paraphrasing from you, there's a segment of Democracy Matters, I believe, or it could have been Race Matters, but I've read them both.
Appreciate that.
And there's a point about nihilism and being black. what are we needing to refocus on? And for me, this is reprioritizing what we're here for. Because to be Black, in essence, is to suffer. And to accept what you have been given, but there's so much that we give back through our sacrifice and our long suffering to this community, to this world, to this place called America. And because of the examples we continue to set, are we in fact learning our lessons, or have we thought ourselves better or greater from whence we came?
Yeah, that's a very, very profound question, a set of questions. I know. Well, is the mic all right here? I hear some technological interventions here. It's a lot of cracking. Maybe that's just the Spirit kicking in. Okay, that's cool. No, you got to open yourself to the Spirit. You got to open yourself to the Spirit. No, it is very important because you see, you remember how Du Bois ends souls of Black folk. He ends talking about the weary traveler and how difficult it is to sustain the journey, not just in one lifetime, but generation after generation. Can you imagine what it was for 244 years for those New World Africans, those Black folk, that had to sustain the love, even when you don't know where your child is? Sustain the love when you know the average age is 27 years old. Sustain the love when you're trying to keep your church or community together under surveillance and so forth. It's amazing that Black folk are actually still here, let alone in their right mind. When you think about it.
I think about it a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I tell my precious vanilla brothers and sisters, I said, if Black folk had decided to form a Black version of the Ku Klux Klan in response to the terror and the trauma, there would be no U.S. democracy. January 6th would look like a tea party. But no, when you get a Martin King, you get a Fannie Lou Hamer, you get a Ella Baker, you get a Philip Randolph, we can go on and on and on. Those become the dominant voices that tell a terrorized, traumatized, hated people that you want to sustain the higher moral and spiritual ground. You don't get in the gangster with the gutter with the gangster. If all you're going to do is just hate back, then you end up with more hate. All you're going to do is say an eye for an eye, you end up blind. Tooth for a tooth, you end up toothless. And it's true, you end up with a fascist government. Because that's what fascism is. It's a survival of the slickest and the triumph of the most powerful. No morality, no spirituality. Everybody obsessed with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. That's what Martin used to say. And in many ways, that's where we're headed if we don't watch ourselves. People think they can say anything, do anything, no accountability, no answerability, no responsibility. Why? Because I did it and I didn't get caught yet. Right. And the folks who might catch me, I got some money for them. I got a new job for them. I got a position for their friends. So more and more people end up well-adjusted to injustice and call that success. And no matter how many material toys you have, if you well-adjusted to injustice, which makes you callous and indifferent, then your soul is still empty. No matter how big your crib is, or how large your car is. Now that's a spiritual insight. That's real. That cuts every human being. You see. Or you end up well-adapted to indifference. So as you go up the ladder, you turn your back on those who are catching hell. Well, somewhere I read, he or she, the greatest among us, will be your servant. And what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. That's orphans, that's widows, that's fatherless, that's motherless. That's the hated, that's the marginalized. That's the precious brothers and sisters in the hoods, in the barrios, on the reservations. No matter what color, the least of these. Those are spiritual and moral insights. And to live in a moment where there's so much spiritual decay,
I think it may be a sign from on high. I see Dr. King looking at us.
look at that boy. Well, I look at Martin, I know everything's all right.
It's all right. It's
Everything's all right. No, but you all work it out one way or the other.
It's a process of elimination.
But can you hear us all right now? Yeah. That's the key. That's the key. That's the key. But what has happened is that we're reaching a moment, it's almost a tipping point, where more and more people are willing to either cave in, give up, and simply adjust themselves to the flow. Which means that rich tradition that Martin represents and so many others is something that they view from a spectator point of view rather than a participant. Wasn't it nice that Martin got out there and loved everybody and he ended up getting shot and under surveillance every day of his life from January 1956 till the day he got shot and viewed as the most dangerous man in America by the FBI? And once a year we're going to come together and remember Martin as I go on about my materialistic quest. You say, no. You got to come to Northwest Arkansas. They still talking about greatness. They don't reduce spiritual and moral greatness to worldly success. You can be worldly successful, yes, but what you going to use it for? You're just going to end up being a peacock walking around. Look at me, I'm X, I'm Y, I'm the first, I'm the second. Peacock strut because they can't fly. Black people come from a people of ego. The ego stirs his nest. Flies high with elegance and nobility. Looks low to keep track of what's going on the ground. So whatever success we have becomes part of our Ephesians 6. We're putting on the full armor. And it becomes part and parcel of our armor committed to integrity, honesty, decency, courage, serving others, even as we are able to reap benefits of those who came before, because we wouldn't have the material gains if it were not just with Martin. There's nameless and anonymous folk, disproportionately chocolate, but not exclusively chocolate. It's true. Y'all got Johnny Cash and C.D. Wright coming out of Arkansas. These are vanilla brothers and sisters, towering figures. The Rabbi Heschels coming out of Jewish communities. Towering figures, not because they're Jewish or white, because they're human beings who choose courage and integrity and honesty. And they're not just abstract allies. They're human beings who choose to be with other human beings. That's like saying Bill Evans is an ally in the Miles Davis quartet. No, he's in the band. He ain't no dang ally. He's in the band. And they making music together at the deepest human level and artistic level and connecting emotionally and intellectually. That's what Martin, as a love conductor on the love train, was trying to do before he was shot down in the name of a hatred and a greed and so forth, because, you know, the devil's busy now. Ain't no doubt about that. The greed and the hatred is always coming at us.
How do we move past the materialism and start moving ourselves toward?
Thank you, Brother Jaron. Give it up for Brother Jaron. No, he's our young brother. Brother Jaron's our young brother. He's on the love train.
He is. He is.
Yes, he is.
Care of us this evening. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So my question is, in all of that, so we talk about the courage. What are we missing as a people? And I am talking about black people in America specifically, the courage to come together to create an organized voice, to have a focus to move us forward. What are we failing to do for one another for us to be able to make that a reality today?
Yeah, we don't have enough people who exemplify in their own fallible way the kind of unconditional love and commitment to unarmed truth to bear witness in such a way that they're willing to pay major, major cost. So when young black folk growing up, they look up and they see all the celebrities on the corporate television. They see all the different forms of entertainment. They see the politicians. Where do they see someone of the moral and spiritual quality of a Martin King or a Fannie Lou Hamer or a Ella Baker, let alone Curtis Mayfield? I tell that to the young musicians when I go into the studio. Do you all know what it means to keep alive the greatest musical tradition of the modern world of artistic creativity and moral fortitude and personal courage? Black music ain't no joke. It has completely reshaped the whole planet of young people around the world, every corner, every nook and cranny, not just because they're black, but because they inherited something and they chose to be a part of something, and they had the highest levels of excellence. Most of them learned it in the church. Count Basie coming out of Calvary Baptist, and Sarah Vaughan out of Mount Zion Baptist, and John Coltrane out of AME Zion, and so forth. What was going on in those churches other than falling in love with a Palestinian Jew named Jesus? It was also unbelievable spiritual formation and moral cultivation and artistic reshaping to find one's voice. Nowadays, you turn on the music and you say, what happened? You have the Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right. What happened to the decline and the decay? The oligarchs who run the recording industry. We don't even have groups among the young brothers who sing as a group, like the Dramatics and the Delphonics and the Whispers and Encounter and Stylistics and Blue Mag. I won't go into all of that. Y'all got Marvin Jr. coming out of Harrow, Arkansas, right up the mighty Dales of Chicago. We ain't got the Al Green out of Forest City, Arkansas yet. The city named after the founder of the Ku Klux Klan produced Al Green. That's America, isn't it? Ooh, that's America. All that love and joy coming out of Al Green. Where'd he get it from? He got exposed to greatness in art and music. Once you no longer have either exposure to it or are no longer interested in it, you think it's just all about the money. It's Wu-Tang Clan, Cream, Cash rules everything around me. Doesn't have to rule me. But they look around and all they see, money making, buying and selling, money taking, everybody obsessed with how much cash they have. Nothing wrong with having cash. I'm not making an argument to be broke as the Ten Commandments now. Don't get me wrong. But if that's all you have is money, then you're still going to live a life of spiritual vacuity and moral emptiness. And that's part of the crisis of our day. And it's among the well-to-do, it's among the middle classes, it's among the poor. And then, what is it in Arkansas now? What? 1 out of 5 children in poverty, 39% of all black children live in poverty. Now, given all the good stuff about Arkansas, I'm here to tell you, 39% of black children in poverty is a crime against humanity, and Martin Luther King Jr. would say it over and over and over again. As well as they fault, and the families and the men are not acting right, and the women are all, yes, we got structural problems we had to come to terms with, personal problems we had to come to terms with, but you can make it a priority when you go to war to find trillions of dollars. But oh, when it comes to the poverty of the least of these, you turn your back. You act like somehow it's their fault. You act like somehow they have to come to terms with it. Then you wonder why there's so much problem with the police and the criminal justice system and the prison system and all of the decrepit schools and all of the indecent housing and unavailable health care. That's Martin King, and let us be honest about this. When Martin was shot down like a dog, 72% of our fellow Americans opposed him, and 50% of black people disagreed with him. Keep that in mind, Because once his body's in the grave, everybody loves him. But when he's walking around breathing, trying to love and trying to organize, folk coming at him tooth and nail. Why are you organizing all these poor people, black, white, red, whatever? Why are you critical of Vietnam and what's happening? Because a Vietnamese child has the same value as a white or black or brown child in Arkansas. He learned that in Vacation Bible School. Jesus loves the little children of the world, red and yellow, black or white. They are precious in his sight. That's not just a song. That's part of the way of life. And you try to lift it up when you raise that issue. Militarism, poverty, racism, and materialism. Those are the four things Martin said. Choking the best of American democracy. Poverty, racism, not just against black folk. Any ideology that loses sight of the rich humanity of other people made in the image and likeness of God. Jewish, Arab, Muslim, Iranian, Iraqi, Ethiopian, Guatemalan, Brazilian, all of them made in the image and likeness of God. What does that mean? Ooh, this is where Martin really got in trouble. He says that means that every flag is under the cross. Every flag. Wave it all you want. Talk about how wonderful your nation state is. Tell the story about the greatness of your country. But there's something greater than your flag, and that's the cross. And that cross signifies unarmed truth, and the condition of truth is to allow the suffering of the least of these to be heard. And that unapologetic love means you're willing to die every day, even as you know that, as Martin put it, that cross is there oftentimes to be hung on. Because if you follow that Palestinian Jew named Jesus of Nazareth, you better deny yourself and pick up your cross. And there's a cross for you, and there's a cross for me if you're in the Christian family. That's Martin. When Martin came to the end of his life, one of the things he said over and over again was what? Most people never understood me. They didn't understand my calling. They thought I was just a civil rights activist. They thought I was out there just fighting for rights and liberties. No. No. If the kingdom of God is within me, I'm going to leave a little heaven behind everywhere I go. And we'll leave heaven behind on every slice and part of the world, because each and every person across national boundaries has a dignity and sanctity. So I'm an internationalist, I'm a globalist, but I begin at home. Because you got a whole lot of black folks today just want to be highly successful. And one of the ways these days you can be successful is to turn your back on black folk. Love everybody but black people. Now that's sick and pathological. Might be good for your career, but it's sick and pathological. You're going to hit a wall sooner or later. Just telling you, still loving you. I've seen it among my colleagues. I got a wonderful brother. Harold Evans still here. Brother Harold Evans, who was the class of 1974 at Harvard. When I saw him today, I had tears in my eyes. We entered Harvard together almost nearly 50 years ago. He's still going strong, working with Brother Robinson. Brother Robinson's, I think, still out there too. God bless him. God bless you. Oh, yes. I salute you, brother. Very, very much so. But it's just got to fight the fatigue. People are getting tired. It takes courage to love. Martin used to say, I'd rather be dead than afraid. Rather be a corpse than a coward. That's serious business.
It is.
That's serious business. You know, I've taught in prisons for 42 years, and I always tell the brothers, I say, how many of you all would take a bullet in the heart for your mama? All of them stand up. I say, I got the right crowd. Because I want to know what you die for. Because that's love. I want to know what kind of burden you're willing to bear. That's what love is. There might not be too many other people you would take a bullet for. One person sitting next to you, I'll take a bullet in my knee, but not my heart for Roosevelt. Okay, we understand. We understand. Absolutely. But it's that level of courage enacted in action for something bigger than you, bigger than your own ego, bigger than your own self. But that love of self goes hand in hand with the love of others.
I appreciate you for
Very much
saying
so.
that, and so eloquently too, because the heart of the matter is one that becomes very complex. And it's not easy for us always to find our way towards courage in this world today. Because you're right, everything tells us to just make that money.
That's true.
Live for you. Matter of fact, I think COVID bred a whole mentality where everybody was for self. And as much as I love the idea of taking care of yourself first, and we always reference the line from our flight attendants, you have to put your oxygen on first before you can help the other person. But somehow, and at some point, we took that very seriously. I'm wondering if we can bring it back together to focus on community, to focus on family, focus on the institutions that made us great. And in our case, a lot of times in the Black community, that was the church. And right now, for everything the church stands for, so there's a lot of corruption. You think of all the sexual assault charges. You think about the fact that there's this awakening amongst African Americans where we try to decide if we should be praying to that God. I'll be honest. There's a lot. There's this awakening that's happening. There's a stirring amongst people. I'm wondering, where do we level set and talk about what we need to bring back or reinstitute back into our communities so we can have a collective voice, so that we can move into places and do things that have been unimaginable for years? How do we get our communities refocused on our success? And I'm asking probably the same question 3 different ways, but I think it's how we all think about life and how we directly deal with these things. We noticed, and I think both of you were on Sunday, both of us were on Sunday Candy at one point, and that was the conversation. It was about how the church made us who we are. And for all the good, bad, and indifferent, there's a lot that I gained from that institution. I mean, I could go into any 5-star restaurant thanks to, I think it was, I'm gonna ask my mom. I'm trying to remember if it was Miss Mary or which one of them. I got a lot of whoopings at church. Either way.
It was out of love, but sometimes they were too much. Sometimes it was too much. Sometimes it was too much.
That love got me far.
Same here.
It was a lot of sermons my granddad would preach where I had to get in order. You know, I'd be trying to, hand out candy or whatever in the pews to the teenagers to be cool. And I got called out one sermon. He said, M&T Willis, if you don't sit down. I mean, dead in the middle of the sermon. Stop me.
That's a form of love, though.
That's
form of love. That's true.
That's love.
You got to protect, respect, and correct in love.
Yeah.
It got all
How
three.
do we get back to that love? How do we get to that love? And honestly, the love for ourselves, that we have enough that we want that for us. Because you're right, we're fighting what society is telling us to be true, and that's making money and being able to make it on your own. And the truth is, I'm nothing without the people that came before me and the people that have been around me. And that's for a lot of you in the crowd. Community is everything on your journey.
That's exactly right. See, for me, as a Christian, I'm never surprised by evil. I'm never paralyzed by despair. The history of the human species is a very ugly story. Most of the history of the species is a history of hatred, greed, envy, resentment, domination, subjugation. What love does is to disrupt that routine and create an alternative. And therefore, you can't but have a certain sense of just how wretched we are as human creatures. And yet at the same time, we're full of a sanctity, made in the image of God. I mean, when I was in Charlottesville with some of our very, very sick white brothers, neo-Nazis in the Klan, I remember one of them come up to me and he said, I can't stand you on TV. You call everybody brother. I say, what brother? He said, I can't stand that. I said, let me tell you something. I said, I'm a Jesus-loving free black man, and nobody has to give me permission as to who I love. I say, Jesus loves you just like Jesus loves me. You choose to be a gangster. And I was a gangster before I met Jesus, and now I'm a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities. So you still got possibility. We on a human continuum, but you represent the worst. You give in to the hatred, give in to the greed, give in to the resentment, give in to the envy. And the irony was, when I walked through the park, they listening to Stevie Wonder. That's America too. Listening to Stevie Wonder, the people who produce him and his genius-like music. He's a love warrior at the highest level, just like Ashford and Simpson. Nobody writing about love like that. And yet they want to kill the people who produced him. And they used to hate Catholics. I ran into David Duke. He's now one of the heads of the Klan. I said, oh, this is upward mobility American style. Now they got the white Catholics running the Klan. So the only ones left, Jews and black folk. And who knows, we might end with some Negroes getting all confused. I think maybe the Klan have a point. Get my sheet together. We got some confused folk out here. It's true. But the crucial thing is, don't get discouraged. This is my brother Curtis Smith. I heard his sermon the other day. Encourage each other. You can't have courage without being encouraged. And as we have less and less examples of courage, then the young generation thinks, well, life is really simply about narrow worldly success without moral and spiritual formation and cultivation. When they look up and they see gangster-like activities of people doing anything for money, anything for status, anything for pleasure, and they get over, say, oh, maybe that's the way to go. Maybe Martin was too far out. No, Martin is that wave in an ocean. He just happened to surface in such a powerful way, but he comes from a tradition of these black peoples. And as these black peoples at our best become more and more exemplary of what he was aspiring to, then you got the possibilities of an awakening or a renaissance. And that's what happens. I view what's happening right now in northwest Arkansas, and I must say, I love folk in Arkansas, but Lord have mercy, who would have expected that the state of Arkansas would be in the vanguard of a possible moral and spiritual awakening? All the Jim Crow in Arkansas, all the hatred and greed and envy and resentment in Arkansas, all of the bombardment of black folk, let alone the indigenous peoples whose land we own, let alone the poor whites still catching hell, holding on, many of them, for some whiteness for dear life and still broke of the Ten Commandments financially. Who would think Arkansas? I said, well, I got news for you. Something's happening in northwest Arkansas. What we have seen, what we've witnessed, the reason why this gathering is in part such a sweet thing is that the very examples of integrity, honesty, decency, courage, and service to others, especially the least of these, is being rewarded, affirmed. This is the way to go. This is the way you keep alive the legacy of King. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of the great prophetic figures and one of the closest friends of Martin King, he used to say, the very future of America depends on how America responds to the legacy of Martin King and others. And if you look at each one of those indices, poverty, racism, materialism, and militarism, how is America doing? We've had some magnificent breakthroughs when it comes to fighting against racism, against black people and white supremacy, but it's primarily the middle class who has benefited. not the working class and the poor. It hasn't trickled down in the way in which it ought. So at the very moment in which we seize unprecedented opportunities for the black professional class, you get the largest mass incarceration regime on the planet. You get decrepit schools increasing, segregated by class and race increasing. And so Martin would come along and say, our struggle against racism has magnificent progress, absolutely. But he would also say with Malcolm X, you don't stab a people 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches and celebrate your progress only. You got to pull the whole knife out. You got to come to terms with the wound and understand the conditions under which the knife went in and the knife went out. But if you end up with a black professional class that loses sight of other folk catching hell on the other side of town, then you believe this progress is overwhelming. This is paradise. This is the yellow brick road for you. What about Jamal and Letitia? We want everybody to get on that road. That's what Martin King was talking about. And when I say Jamal and Letitia, I'm so talking about Jose and Juanita. I'm talking about our brothers and sisters from Marshall Islands that you all have been embracing here. I'm talking about the brothers and sisters from Latin America. I'm talking about the brothers and sisters from Africa. I'm talking about the brothers and sisters from the Middle East. I'm talking about all of those folk who suffer no matter who they are. And that means then you're going to get in trouble. That's what it means to pick up your cross and follow Jesus.
You have to lead me directly into a hot topic, and I love it. I love it for me. Okay? Anybody else, close your ears.
But I do want to salute you, Sister Emma. I'm telling you, because you're holding up a bloodstained banner. But you can go right on with your question.
All right. So we talk about, how do we do this? So in this conversation about who we are, where we've come from, what it is to reflect back, pick that mantle up, and charge forward with the courage to be able to create change. What happens when we're no longer telling those stories? And this is the hot topic of critical race theory, because I struggle with the idea of not being able to talk about my ancestors and not being able to share that in a format where it matters, because stories actually matter. These people's journeys and their testaments to life actually matter. So as we talk about nihilism, it's almost like it's a plan to erase that connection.
Yes.
And to remove us from who we are, knowing we still don't know from whence we came. We can do a 23andMe, we can do an Ancestry.com, but that only gets me so far. I still have lost sight of who my ancestors are or were. I don't have a greater sense of belonging or connection because we know how the black family's been destroyed. But what do we need to do as black people to make sure our stories are kept and that we share them? And I know that's one of those things where it's a responsibility in your household to be able to uplift that history. But I mean broadly. Our stories are being pushed all the way to the back. And we're being told that they are harmful, they're divisive, they're polarizing. And I don't find that to be true. When we live in a country that is built off revisionist history, we are the marketing machine of the world. We can tell whatever reality we want to, and it's expected to be accepted. So where do we go with this hot topic of critical race theory and the rebuilding of Black America? Or maybe not even the rebuild in America, Black America, probably the growth and hopefully the building of Black America.
Yes, I appreciate that question. It's so much very impoverished discussion about critical race theory. I was blessed to write the foreword for that text when it came out. And these days, of course, you mentioned that, you got to run for cover with all the death threats and things, because we're not living in a spiritually mature culture. But I start off with the notion that truth is bigger than any one human story. That all of us have lens through which we view the world. And we learn from the truths of various stories and lenses that people have. And with critical race theory, if you actually look at it, what it says is we're going to look at the history of America through the lens of the enslaved and the Jim Crowed and the Jane Crowed and the ghettoized. Now, that particular lens doesn't mean it has all the truth. Not at all. All of us are fallible. But anybody who tries to tell the story of the emergence and the making of America without saying a word about slavery, economic foundation, without saying a word about Jim and Jane Crow, without saying a word about black culture and black music. Can anybody tell a story about America as if black people were never, ever, ever here or only here as objects to be manipulated and slaves to be subjugated? No. Now, there have been historians that have tried to tell a story. And they say, America begins with Mayflower and this magnificent march of freedom and this great beacon of hope for freedom for everybody, and invited people from all around the world to come. And then you get a little footnote. Now, we acknowledge that this is going to be very difficult when applied to black people. Now, we begin with the footnote.
Ooh, Dr. West.
Begin with the footnote. Don't start off with the deodorized discourse. Keep it funky. Keep it funky. There's human beings down here struggling, shuddering. Now, that doesn't mean that black people have a monopoly on truth. It just means that black people got a whole lot of truth to tell, but no monopoly on truth at all. Not at all, because it in part has been for many folk. Come to America as an immigrant from Ireland and Italy, where they had vicious forms of domination, and they come and they, like the University of Arkansas, what was that about, 1862? Is that right, Brother Robinson? You wrote the book on it. What was 1862? The Merrill Act. What was the Merrill Act? It was a little later. Oh, yeah, but did it feed into the Merrill Act, feed into the University of Arkansas ever? Yes, sir. I thought so. I appreciate your correction now, absolutely. And we haven't got to the 160 free acres. Can you imagine that? 160 free acres for European peasants and black people here undergoing land dispossession, looking for 4 acres and a mule, and you can come from outside of the country and get 160 free acres as long as you want to cultivate it in an ingenious way. That's white supremacy at work. That's not trashing white people. That's telling the truth about the development of a country in which white supremacy was being enacted in relation to a predatory capitalist exposure. That's truth-telling. Now, unfortunately, a lot of our right-wing white brothers and sisters say, well, you know, you're attacking me, or you're talking about grandmama as if she was enabling the Klan. No, we're not talking about your grandmama. It was her choice, whatever her choice was that she did. But you are here now. What you gonna do in relation to the history? You a human being. Your grandmama may have been with the black folk, with Frederick Douglass, with Harriet Tubman. There's always a slice of courageous white brothers and sisters. It's just that they got a whole lot of cousins who didn't get the memo, if you know what I mean. But no, you keep track of that rich history of white brothers and sisters over against the white supremacy. You got a history of that in Arkansas, white brothers and sisters. But you got a whole lot of them who fit right in with the benefits, you see. And so what critical race theory is simply saying is we're going to broaden the discourse so that the voices about the enslaved and the Jim Crowed and the Jane Crowed and the lynched and the ghettoized and the hated will be heard as part of the larger conversation. Now, see, those kinds of more nuanced formulations you don't really have on TV. Yeah.
How can you do CRT, have no CRT, no critical race theory, but uphold diversity, equity, and inclusion work?
Well, I mean, one, you see, you can't have diversity without some veracity. You see, and veracity is truth-telling. You can't have inclusion unless you acknowledge that those who are being included are also about transformation. If you want your organization exactly the same, but you want black, brown, and other folk sprinkled in, but the structure is exactly the same with no transformation, you either want highly assimilated, well-selected black people who will wear the mask, or you're going to have to open up your organization. And the irony is that the best of the black freedom movement, which has always embraced everybody, freedom for everybody, rights and liberties for everybody, has been a leaven in the loaf. So if you want your loaf to expand, you need to embrace the leaven. If you want your loaf to go stale, then exclude the leaven and think that somehow you can still make it. And we're talking not just financially, though we are in part, we're also talking about the quality of the relations in your company, the quality of the relations in your city, in your community, and in your nation. Because when you have people at each other's throats, no business can thrive. But so we saw that with the George Floyd Jr. situation. People hit the streets, all colors. And then you get all of a sudden folks in high places. Oh my God, I think we got a problem here. Let's move on our diversity programs here. We've got a problem here. Let's expand. Absolutely, but expand because of principle too. It's the right thing to do. It's just not strategic. There's an integrity in the process. It's just not tactical. And that goes beyond just business calculation. It takes us right back to moral cultivation, spiritual formation. What kinds of human beings do you want in your company, enterprise, community, school, government, across the board? But it's so very difficult these days to communicate across political and ideological lines because the distrust seems to be so strong. And as soon as you mention critical race theory, you know, they figure that you just come right out of some kind of, what's be the right language here? I don't want to deodorize it for Arkansas.
You don't have to deodorize it. I'm not influenced by anybody here. It's okay. It's absolutely okay to say.
Well, I put it this way, you know, and I do my Southern tour all the time, and they talk about critical race theory. And as soon as I mention it, people just think I'm some kind of moral monster or something. I say, you think I'm a moral monster? You're talking about my mama. Wait a minute, we got a real problem here. I wasn't raised like that. I'm committed to truth and beauty and goodness as a Christian, the holy. If you got a better argument, tell me what it is. Should we tell stories about America that says nothing about slavery? Well, I think we overstress it. I think we need to just move on. Oh, I see. You just want to move on. Mm-hmm. But when the catastrophe comes to your house, you don't want to just move on. I'm sitting here looking at my young philosopher, Philander Smith. Yeah, raise your hand, brother. There it is. Get it up for this brother. Give it up for this brother. Look at you. I see James Cone, the great liberation theologian from Bearden, Arkansas. Graduated from Philander. He makes the same point. When the catastrophe comes to your house, you want all the history in the world. When America goes to war, we want the history of the country from the very beginning, 1789. But when it comes to black folk, it's just time to move on. No, there's consequences, there are repercussions, there are implications of the past. The great Faulkner used to say there's a pastness in the present, a pastness operating in the present. But if we can't free up some of our right-wing brothers and sisters to see that we who talk about critical race theory are not moral monsters, but come out of the legacy of our dear brother Martin and others, then it's very difficult to see how we can move forward. Because let us be very honest.
But we're also asking ourselves not to appeal to logic in that argument. Because I'm going to be very frank. You were asking me not to know about my parents until I'm an adult.
That's right.
I mean, that's the simplistic way to deal with CRT and DEI. It's like, let's not deal with it until you work for me.
I tell you, yeah, you can't go in by denying you know, mama and daddy and grandmama and granddaddy. You were talking about the churches the other minute. And I mean, one of the reasons why we have problematic expectations at times of these churches is because you go all the way back. The church is founded on who? Peter. What did Peter do? Denied Jesus 3 times. That's not high expectations if that's the foundation of your church. But the greatness of Peter is what? He didn't deny that he denied. He had bounced back. And his bounce back was serious. He knew he was wrong. He knew he was cowardly. He knew he got scared and intimidated when his best friend, his leader, he says, I don't even know him. But then when he said, I got to change, something got to die in me so I can emerge with more love of my Jesus, my friend. I'm going to be the foundation of the church, as he said, but I recognize that my history's still there. That's the foundation of the church, which means every church has shot through it Peter potential of corruption and manipulation and fear and greed, because there's human beings in the church. And yet the miracle of the church is what? Somehow that precious gospel still trickles through all of the cracked vessels in that church to the degree to which they can turn away from themselves and keep track of that cross that exemplifies such unbelievable love and truth, so that it changes and transforms them to be, in the language of John Coltrane, forces of good for a love supreme. And that's the history. And our churches today, ooh, it's hard for the churches to remain tied to the prophetic legacy of King. But keep in mind, Martin himself was what? He was kicked out of the National Baptist Convention. That's my denomination, my convention. They kicked Martin out. Kicked him out. Every church was never a supporter of Martin Luther King Jr. We went to Detroit. There were just 2 churches that even have him there. Aretha Franklin's father's church, Reverend C.L. Franklin, and Hartford Memorial, that produced Anita Baker later on. Those 2 churches. How come? They were scared. And so many of them were tied into the powers that be of the Ford plant and the Ford family that's paying off the preachers. You say, ooh, Lord, that gets pretty ugly, doesn't it? Yeah, the truth can be ugly.
Can we do a part 2?
No, yeah, we're going to have to come back and do a part 2. You all kind of stay so long.
People with bedtime.
Nah, no, I don't know. You all so kind of stay so long.
No, let's keep going. I don't have that authority. Y'all, do we need to keep going? I feel like everybody's, okay, people are still, okay. One thing I want to do, and I want to thank Brother West tremendously for all the insights, all the sharing, and all the time you gave to us this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, thank
I
you.
salute you, and I salute your precious mother.